What if the most powerful move you ever made was the one nobody saw coming? What if the secret weapon of the most successful people alive wasn't a strategy, wasn't a network, wasn't even a skill? What if it was simply silence? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you in the next few minutes has the potential to completely rewire the way you think about success, ambition, and the quiet art of winning. Intro. There is a particular kind of person you've probably encountered in your life. They don't talk much about what they're building. They don't post every milestone. They don't need the room to know their name before they've done the work. They move quietly, deliberately, almost invisibly, and then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, they arrive. Fully formed. Undeniable. Impossible to ignore. And everyone around them asks the same question. When did this happen? How did we miss it? They didn't miss it. They just weren't supposed to see it. Not yet. Not while it was being built. Welcome to one of the most underrated principles of lasting success, the principle that the most powerful moves are almost always made in silence. Today on the Stoic Path, we are pulling back the curtain on something that high achievers, ancient philosophers, great warriors, and quiet giants have understood for centuries, while the rest of the world was busy performing, announcing, and explaining themselves into mediocrity. We are talking about going silent to win big. And by the time we are done, you will never look at silence the same way again. The world that rewards noise. Let's start with the world we actually live in. Because context matters. We live in a world that has made noise a currency. Post it. Share it. Announce it. Broadcast it. Tell everyone what you're doing, where you're going, what you're planning, what you're feeling, what you had for breakfast, what your goals are for the year, what your morning routine looks like, what your vision board says. And if you don't, if you choose to move quietly, people get suspicious. Why is she so secretive? What is he hiding? They must not be doing anything worth talking about. Silence has been rebranded as failure. Quietness has been mistaken for emptiness. The person who doesn't announce their moves has been confused with the person who has no moves to make. But here is what the noise-worshipping world has forgotten. The lion does not announce the hunt. Think about that for a moment. The lion, the apex predator, the ruler of the savannah, the animal that has inspired kings and warriors and leaders across every civilization in human history, does not gather the other animals and say, "Excuse me, I'd like everyone to know that I will be hunting today. Please watch. Please be impressed." The lion simply hunts. Quietly. Deliberately. Effectively. And when the work is done, the result speaks louder than any announcement ever could. This is the first lesson of going silent to win big. Results are louder than words. Always. Without exception. Short story, The Two Students. Let me tell you about two students who started at the same university on the same day, in the same program, with roughly the same academic starting point. The first student, let's call him Marcus, was loud about his ambitions from day one. He told everyone he was going to graduate top of his class. He posted his study goals online. He announced every good grade, every completed assignment, every step forward. He wanted everyone to know he was working hard. He needed them to know. The second student, let's call her Amara, said almost nothing. She sat in the front row and asked sharp questions. She spent her evenings in the library when others were socializing. She didn't post about her goals. She didn't discuss her plans. She just worked. Quietly. Consistently. Without audience. 4 years later, Marcus graduated with average marks, exhausted, burned out, and quietly confused about why the results hadn't matched the announcement. The energy he spent performing his ambition had slowly drained the energy available for actual work. Amara graduated top of her class. With job offers already on the table. With a reputation built entirely on results, not rhetoric. At the graduation ceremony, people who had barely noticed Amara for 4 years suddenly wanted to know everything about her. How did she do it? What was her secret? She smiled and said something that has stayed with me. I just decided early on that I'd rather be underestimated than overexposed. Underestimated. Not invisible. Not passive. Not disengaged. Underestimated. Because there is extraordinary power in being underestimated. There is freedom in it. There is strategic advantage in it. When people don't see you coming, when they've written you off, overlooked you, dismissed you as unremarkable, you are free to build without interference. Free to grow without scrutiny. Free to become without the pressure of a watching audience demanding you perform your progress in real time. And then, when you arrive, nothing can diminish what is already done. The science and philosophy of silence. Now I want to go deeper. Because this is not just motivational rhetoric. This is grounded in both ancient wisdom and modern understanding of how human beings actually function at their highest level. The Stoics, and you know on this channel we always come back to the Stoics, were deeply committed to the practice of silence as a tool of power and wisdom. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic teachers, gave his students what sounds like a shockingly simple instruction. He said, "Better to be silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." But he wasn't just talking about avoiding embarrassment. He was talking about the discipline of preserving energy. Every word spoken, in the Stoic framework, is an expenditure. It is energy leaving the body. Attention leaving the mind. Focus departing from the task at hand. And for the Stoic committed to excellence, committed to the daily practice of becoming better, sharper, more capable, unnecessary expenditure was simply unacceptable. Why spend words announcing the goal when those same words, that same breath, that same mental energy, could be spent pursuing it? Modern neuroscience has actually confirmed something that ancient philosophers understood intuitively. There is a phenomenon researchers call social reality. When you tell someone about a goal, when you announce it, share it, broadcast it, your brain, in a fascinating and deeply inconvenient twist, begins to treat the announcement as partial completion of the goal itself. You get a small dopamine hit. A little reward. A sense of progress, without any actual progress having been made. And that small, premature reward slightly reduces the hunger. Slightly dampens the drive. Slightly loosens the grip of urgency that is absolutely essential for doing the hard, unglamorous, unseen work that real achievement requires. In other words, talking about what you're going to do makes you slightly less likely to do it. The silence isn't just poetic. The silence is strategic. Short story, The Sculptor and the Stone. There is a story told about a sculptor, the kind of artist who works in stone, who chips away at marble for months or years before revealing a finished work. A young apprentice once asked the sculptor, "Why don't you show people what you're working on while you're working on it? Wouldn't the feedback help?" The sculptor set down his tools and looked at the apprentice for a long moment. Then he said, "Every opinion I hear while the work is unfinished becomes a chisel in someone else's hand. And I am the only one who knows what this stone is supposed to become. Every opinion becomes a chisel in someone else's hand." I want you to sit with that image for a moment. When your work is unfinished, when your vision is still forming, when your plan is still developing, when you are still in the messy, uncertain, beautifully fragile middle of becoming, every voice you let in becomes a force shaping the outcome. Some of those voices will be well-meaning. Some will be critical. Some will be envious dressed up as concern. Some will be genuinely supportive but simply unable to see what you see, because they are not you, and the vision lives inside you alone. And every one of those voices, if you let them in too early, becomes a chisel in someone else's hand. The work belongs to you. Protect it. Keep it covered until it is ready to be seen. Because unfinished things are vulnerable things. And vulnerability, when exposed prematurely to the wrong environment, doesn't invite protection. It invites interference. The 3 enemies of silent work. Now I want to name something important. Because going silent, truly committing to the discipline of building without broadcasting, has enemies. And these enemies don't come from outside you. They live inside you. Enemy 1, the need for validation. This is the deepest one. And I want to speak to it with complete honesty. Most of us, far more of us than will comfortably admit it, have a hunger for external validation that we have never fully examined or addressed. We want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged. We want someone else's recognition to confirm that what we are doing has value. There is a moment. A specific, unmistakable, almost cinematic moment, that every person who has ever committed to silent, disciplined, unglamorous building eventually experiences. It is the moment the work becomes undeniable. Not to you. You always knew. You knew in the dark hours. You knew in the quiet mornings. You knew on the days when nothing seemed to be moving and doubt was louder than conviction. But now, the world knows. And the world has no choice but to acknowledge what silence built. This moment does not arrive with a warning. It does not send a calendar invitation. It simply arrives, the way dawn arrives, the way a tide turns, inevitable, unhurried, and completely indifferent to whether anyone was ready for it. This is part 2. This is where the silence becomes the victory. The hidden architecture of success. Let me tell you something about the buildings you admire most. Whether it is a skyscraper cutting through a city skyline, or a bridge spanning an impossible distance, or a cathedral that has stood for 600 years, the part you see, the part that takes your breath away, the part that gets photographed and celebrated and written about, that part is almost never what made it possible. What made it possible is underground. The foundation. The pilings driven deep into the earth. The steel and concrete and engineering that nobody sees and nobody photographs because it is buried beneath the surface, invisible, unglamorous, and absolutely essential. Without the foundation, the skyline falls. Without the invisible work, the visible achievement is impossible. This is the hidden architecture of every success worth having. And I want you to hold that image, of the foundation buried deep beneath the surface, as we move through everything we are about to discuss. Because every principle, every story, every practice in this second part of our conversation is ultimately about the same thing. The unseen work that makes the undeniable result inevitable. Short story, The Chess Player. There was once a chess player, a young man from a small town who nobody expected very much from. He wasn't the most naturally talented player at his club. He wasn't the most socially connected. He didn't come from a family with resources or influence. He had none of the visible advantages that people typically point to when explaining someone's success. What he had was a practice. Every night, after the rest of the club had gone home, after the conversations had ended and the lights in the social areas had dimmed, this young man stayed. Alone. With a board and a clock and a notebook. He studied positions that had beaten him. He replayed games he had lost, move by move, asking not why did I lose but what did I not yet understand. He worked on his weaknesses with the same intensity that most people reserve only for their strengths. He told no one about these sessions. He didn't post about his late nights. He didn't seek encouragement or sympathy for the difficulty of the work. He simply came back, night after night, to the board and the clock and the notebook. 3 years later, he won the national championship. And when a journalist asked him after the final match how he had managed to defeat opponents who were widely considered far superior, he said something quietly devastating. They were playing the game. I was studying it. There is a difference. Playing the game versus studying it. Performing versus preparing. Being seen versus becoming ready. There is a difference. And that difference, invisible, silent, underground, is exactly what separates the person who arrives from the person who almost arrived. What silence actually does, the 4 gifts. I want to get specific now. Because silence is not passive. Silence is not the absence of something. Silence is an active, generative, extraordinarily productive state, when it is chosen deliberately and protected fiercely. Here are the 4 gifts that silence gives to everyone willing to embrace it. Gift 1, silence gives you clarity. Noise is the enemy of clarity. And we live, as we established in Part 1, in a world saturated with noise. The opinions of others. The highlight reels of competitors. The constant stream of information demanding our attention and reaction. When you step back from the noise, when you choose silence over performance, something remarkable begins to happen inside you. You start to hear yourself again. Your actual instincts. Your genuine convictions. The specific, personal, irreplaceable vision that belongs to you and only you, the one that gets drowned out when you are too busy listening to everyone else. There is a story told about the great inventor Nikola Tesla, a man whose mind produced ideas so far ahead of their time that many of them are only now being fully understood and applied. Tesla had a practice that his contemporaries found eccentric and unsociable. He would disappear. Not physically, though sometimes that too. But mentally. He would withdraw from the noise of collaboration, conversation, and social obligation, and he would go into a silence so complete that people who worked near him thought something was wrong. What was actually happening was this: Tesla was listening. Not to the world outside. To the world inside. To the place where the ideas lived before they became inventions. He once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude." Be alone, that is the secret of invention. Be alone, that is when ideas are born. Clarity is born in silence. And you cannot build something extraordinary if you cannot first see it clearly. Gift 2, silence gives you focus. Here is a truth that the productivity industry spends billions of dollars dancing around without ever quite landing on. You cannot do deep work in a shallow environment. Deep work, the kind of focused, concentrated, cognitively demanding effort that produces genuinely exceptional results, requires a particular kind of mental environment. One that is quiet. One that is protected from interruption. One that has been deliberately cleared of the noise and distraction that fragment attention into useless pieces. The person who is constantly talking about what they are building, constantly engaging with reactions, fielding opinions, responding to commentary, is a person whose attention is perpetually divided. And divided attention is the death of mastery. Cal Newport, one of the most important thinkers on this subject in recent years, describes deep work as the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task, and argues that this ability is becoming simultaneously more rare and more valuable in our distracted world. The Stoics said it first, of course, in different language, but with the same precision. Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to make you better. Withdraw. Go inward. Protect the focus." Because focus, sustained over time, applied to the right work, is how ordinary people produce extraordinary results. Gift 3, silence gives you protection. This one is practical. Deeply, immediately practical. When you announce your plans, when you broadcast your goals, your strategies, your timelines, your intentions, you hand information to people who may not want you to succeed. Now, I want to be careful here. I am not advocating paranoia. Not everyone is a competitor. Not everyone is threatened by your success. Many people in your life genuinely want the best for you. But, and this is important, even well-meaning people can become obstacles when given too much information too early. The friend who loves you but doesn't share your belief in the vision, and whose doubt, even gently expressed, plants a seed of uncertainty in your own mind. The colleague who seems supportive but is quietly competitive, and whose awareness of your strategy gives them the opportunity to position themselves advantageously. The family member who worries about you, whose worry, however loving, becomes a pressure you now have to manage in addition to everything else you are already carrying. Silence protects you from all of it. Not because you are hiding. Not because you are ashamed. But because the work deserves to be developed in a protected environment before it is exposed to the unpredictable weather of other people's reactions. There is an old proverb, simple, almost too simple, that carries more wisdom than its brevity suggests. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. And not everyone who doubts you is your enemy. Silence teaches you the difference. Because when you stop broadcasting, you start observing. And what you observe, about who shows up without being told, who supports without needing to understand, who remains in your corner even in the absence of updates, tells you everything you need to know about who deserves to be inside the circle. Gift 4, Silence gives you power. This is the gift that ties all the others together. There is a quality that the most compelling, most commanding, most deeply respected people in any room tend to share. It is not loudness. It is not aggression. It is not the relentless assertion of their own importance. It is presence. A groundedness. A stillness. The sense that this person knows exactly who they are and does not need the room to confirm it. That they are operating from an internal authority so solid, so well established, that external validation has simply become irrelevant. This quality, this presence, is built in silence. Because every time you choose the work over the announcement, you are making a deposit into an account that nobody can see but everybody eventually feels. Every morning you show up in the quiet. Every hour you spend in focused, undistracted effort. Every time you resist the urge to perform your progress and instead simply make progress, you are building a relationship with yourself that becomes the unshakable foundation of genuine confidence. Not the loud, performative confidence of someone who needs others to believe in them. The quiet, settled, immovable confidence of someone who has shown up for themselves, in the dark, without an audience, without applause, and knows, from direct personal experience, exactly what they are capable of. That is power. Real power. The kind that cannot be given to you by likes or followers or the approval of a crowd. The kind that can only be built, slowly, quietly, faithfully, in the sacred space of disciplined silence. Short story, The Farmer and the Harvest. There was a farmer who planted his fields every spring with the same quiet dedication. His neighbors were talkers. They would gather at the fence line and discuss their plans, what they were going to plant, how much they expected to harvest, what prices they anticipated at market. They were enthusiastic. They were optimistic. They were loud about their intentions. The farmer listened politely and said very little. Then he went back to his field. He worked when the weather was good. He worked when the weather was difficult. He worked in the early mornings before the heat came and in the late evenings after the heat had passed. He didn't post about his progress. He didn't gather at the fence line to update anyone on how the crops were coming along. He just tended his field. And come harvest time, year after year, without exception, this quiet farmer's yields were the fullest, the most consistent, the most reliable in the region. His neighbors would shake their heads and wonder at it. They had talked about farming as much as he had actually farmed. They had planned and discussed and projected, and somehow, at the end of every season, the results told the story that the conversations never could. One autumn, a young man from the town came to the farmer and asked him directly, "What is your secret? Every year your harvest is the best. What do you know that the others don't?" The farmer looked out at his field for a long moment. Then he said, "The soil doesn't care about your plans. It only responds to your presence. The soil doesn't care about your plans. It only responds to your presence. Whatever field you are working in, whatever dream you are cultivating, whatever goal you are pursuing, whatever version of yourself you are trying to grow into, the field does not care about your announcements. It only responds to your presence. Show up. Quietly. Consistently. Without needing the field to applaud you while you work. The harvest will come. It always comes for the ones who stay.